If you've been told you have fatty liver, or if you're worried about developing it, I can almost guarantee the conversation went something like this. Lose weight, cut the sugar, reduce alcohol, exercise more, and those things matter. They genuinely do. But what nobody told you is that there's another pathway driving fat into your liver that has nothing to do with what you eat or drink. And it's happening right now from an organ you'd never suspect, your gut. There is a direct blood vessel that connects your intestines to your liver. It's called the portal vein. And when the lining of your gut becomes damaged, substances that should stay inside your intestines, bacterial toxins, inflammatory molecules, and metabolic waste, leak through the gut wall and travel through that vein straight into the liver. The liver's immune cells react, inflammation ignites, fat accumulation accelerates, and fibrosis begins. This is called the gut-liver axis, and it is one of the most researched but least discussed mechanisms in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It explains why some people develop fatty liver despite eating reasonably well. It explains why fatty liver can progress to inflammation and scarring even when the patient is making dietary improvements. And it explains why standard liver advice, focused entirely on sugar, alcohol, and weight, misses an entire dimension of the disease. In this video, I'm going to explain exactly how your gut drives liver disease, what damages the gut barrier in the first place, and why the foods that harm your liver might not be the foods you think. By the end, you'll understand a cause of fatty liver that your doctor almost certainly hasn't mentioned. Hi, I'm Dr. Alex. I'm an emergency medicine doctor, and after nearly 10 years in the AAND, I've seen what happens when liver disease goes undetected for too long. Patients with advanced cirrhosis who never drank heavily, patients with liver failure whose only risk factor was a metabolic environment nobody investigated. What I've learned from a decade on the front line is that the liver doesn't fail suddenly, it fails slowly, through mechanisms that are often invisible to standard testing. My mission now is to make those mechanisms visible, so people can intervene while the damage is still reversible. If you're watching this, you're already thinking about your health more seriously than most people ever will. And I want to make you a promise. I promise to keep creating the most helpful, science-backed videos I possibly can to help you prevent the diseases I see in the emergency department every single day. All I ask is that you give this channel a chance. Hit the subscribe button and the like button right now. If you get to the end of this video and you didn't learn something new, feel free to unsubscribe. No hard feelings at all. But if you give me your attention, I'll give you everything I've learned from over a decade in medicine. So please subscribe, like, and let's get into this. To understand how your gut can damage your liver, you first need to understand the physical plumbing that connects them. Because this isn't a vague, indirect hormonal connection. This is a direct, high-volume blood vessel that carries everything your gut absorbs straight to the liver before it reaches anywhere else in the body. The portal vein is one of the most important blood vessels in your body, and most people have never heard of it. It collects blood from your entire digestive tract, your stomach, your small intestine, your large intestine, your pancreas, and your spleen, and delivers it directly to the liver. This means that everything absorbed through your gut wall, nutrients, medications, toxins, bacterial products, all of it passes through the liver first. The liver acts as a filter, processing what's useful and neutralizing what's harmful, before allowing the cleaned blood to enter general circulation. In a healthy state, this system works beautifully. Your gut absorbs nutrients. The portal vein delivers them to the liver. The liver processes them and distributes them to the rest of the body. The system is efficient, controlled, and safe. But there's a critical condition that has to be met for this to work. The gut lining has to be intact. Your intestinal lining is a single layer of cells, just one cell thick, that separates the contents of your gut from your bloodstream. It is one of the most important barriers in the human body. On one side is the interior of your intestines, which contains food particles, digestive enzymes, trillions of bacteria, and a host of substances that should never enter your blood. On the other side is the portal venous system, which feeds directly into the liver. These intestinal cells are held together by structures called tight junctions, which are protein complexes that seal the gaps between cells. When tight junctions are healthy, they allow nutrients through in a controlled, selective manner while keeping bacteria, bacterial fragments, and large inflammatory molecules locked inside the gut. The barrier is selective. It lets the good stuff through and keeps the harmful stuff out. When tight junctions are damaged, the barrier becomes permeable, gaps open between the cells, and substances that should stay inside the intestines, most importantly, bacterial endotoxins called lipopolysaccharides, or LPS, begin leaking through the gut wall into the portal vein blood. This is what researchers call increased intestinal permeability, and it's commonly referred to as leaky gut. Now, I want to be clear, the term leaky gut has been overused and sometimes misrepresented in alternative health circles. But the scientific concept behind it, increased intestinal permeability and endotoxin translocation, is well established in peer-reviewed research. Studies published in the journal Gut and in Hepatology have demonstrated a direct and measurable link between increased intestinal permeability, elevated blood LPS levels, and the progression of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. This is not fringe science. This is mainstream hepatology research that hasn't yet filtered into standard clinical conversations. When lipopolysaccharides and other bacterial products leak through the gut wall and arrive at the liver through the portal vein, they encounter the liver's resident immune cells, called Kupffer cells. Kupffer cells are specialized macrophages that sit inside the liver's blood filtering channels, the sinusoids, and their job is to detect and neutralize any harmful material coming from the gut. When LPS arrives in small amounts, Kupffer cells handle it quietly. They engulf the endotoxin, neutralize it, and the system moves on. No inflammation, no damage, but when the gut barrier is compromised and LPS is arriving in larger chronic quantities, Kupffer cells become activated. They shift into an inflammatory state and begin releasing a cascade of pro-inflammatory cytokines, including TNF-alpha, interleukin-6, and interleukin-1 beta. These inflammatory signals do three things simultaneously inside the liver. First, they promote fat accumulation within liver cells by upregulating the pathways of de novo lipogenesis, the same fat creation process that fructose drives. Second, they damage hepatocytes directly, causing cell death and triggering the repair processes that lead to scar tissue formation, which is fibrosis. Third, they recruit additional immune cells into the liver, amplifying the inflammatory cycle and pushing simple fatty liver, which is called steatosis, into the more dangerous inflammatory stage called steatohepatitis, or NASH. This is the mechanism by which your gut directly drives liver disease, and it operates independently of how much sugar you eat, how much alcohol you drink, or how much weight you carry. A person with a perfect diet but a damaged gut barrier can still develop progressive fatty liver disease because the inflammatory signal is coming from below, through the portal vein, not from the food on their plate. This is arguably the most important and least discussed source of gut barrier damage. Ultra-processed foods contain emulsifiers, compounds added to improve texture, extend shelf life, and prevent ingredients from separating. Common examples include polysorbate 80, carboxymethylcellulose, and lecithins used in industrial quantities. Research published in Nature has demonstrated that these emulsifiers directly damage the mucus layer that protects the intestinal epithelium, reduce the diversity of beneficial gut bacteria, and increase intestinal permeability in both animal and human studies. The effect is not subtle. These additives strip away the protective mucus that coats the inside of your intestines, exposing the single-cell thick barrier underneath to direct contact with bacteria and their toxins. The tight junctions become stressed, permeability increases, and LPS translocation to the liver accelerates. You could eat an emulsifier containing food with no added sugar, no fructose, and no alcohol, and it would still damage your gut barrier and contribute to liver inflammation through this pathway. The composition of your gut microbiome directly affects the integrity of your intestinal barrier. Beneficial bacteria, particularly species that produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, actively maintain tight junction integrity and support the mucus layer. When the balance of bacteria shifts away from these protective species, whether through poor diet, antibiotic use, chronic stress, or lack of dietary fiber, the gut barrier weakens. Dysbiotic gut microbiomes also tend to harbor more gram-negative bacteria, which are the primary producers of LPS. So a damaged microbiome doesn't just weaken the barrier, it also increases the quantity of endotoxins waiting on the other side of it. More toxins and a weaker barrier is precisely the combination that maximizes LPS translocation to the liver. Research published in the Journal of Hepatology has shown that patients with NEF-LD have significantly different gut microbiome profiles compared to healthy controls, with reduced diversity and lower levels of butyrate-producing species. Chronic psychological stress affects the gut through the gut-brain axis, a bidirectional communication network between the central nervous system and the enteric nervous system in the intestines. Sustained cortisol elevation reduces blood flow to the intestinal mucosa, impairs the production of protective mucus, and directly loosens tight junctions between epithelial cells. Studies published in Gut have demonstrated that chronic stress increases intestinal permeability measurably in human subjects. This means that stress doesn't just damage your liver through cortisol-driven fat storage and insulin resistance. It also damages your liver by breaking down the gut barrier and allowing endotoxins to reach the liver through the portal vein. Stress attacks the liver from both directions simultaneously, and neither pathway is visible on standard liver blood tests. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen and naproxen are well documented to increase intestinal permeability even at standard over-the-counter doses. They inhibit prostaglandin production in the gut lining, which reduces the protective mucus layer and compromises tight junction integrity. Regular NSAID use creates a chronic state of increased gut permeability that feeds endotoxins to the liver continuously. Antibiotics, while sometimes necessary and life-saving, can dramatically alter the composition of the gut microbiome, reducing beneficial species and allowing harmful bacteria to proliferate. A single course of broad-spectrum antibiotics can shift the microbiome in ways that take months to recover from. During that recovery period, the gut barrier is vulnerable and LPS translocation can increase significantly. This is one reason why patients sometimes develop or worsen liver inflammation following antibiotic treatment for an unrelated infection. So here's the picture I need you to see, because this is the part that changes how you think about fatty liver entirely. The standard model of fatty liver focuses on one pathway: too much energy in, not enough out. Eat too much sugar, consume too much fructose, drink too much alcohol, and the liver stores the excess as fat. That pathway is real, and I've covered it in detail in other videos. Reducing fructose, cutting ultra-processed food, and managing insulin resistance are all essential for liver health. But there is a second front, and the second front is the gut-liver axis. Even if you clean up your diet perfectly, if your gut barrier is compromised, your liver is receiving a chronic stream of bacterial endotoxins through the portal vein that trigger Kupffer cell activation, drive inflammation, promote fat accumulation, and accelerate fibrosis independently of what you eat. This is why some patients improve their diet dramatically and still see fatty liver progress on imaging. This is why some patients lose significant weight and their liver enzymes don't improve as expected. And this is why fatty liver treatment that focuses only on dietary fat and sugar, without addressing gut health, will always be incomplete for a significant number of patients. The hidden cause of fatty liver that doctors rarely mention isn't hidden because it's controversial. It's hidden because the gut-liver axis doesn't have a simple diagnostic test in routine clinical practice. There's no standard blood marker your GP can order that says your gut is leaking endotoxins into your liver. The research is there, the mechanism is established, but the clinical tools haven't caught up yet. That doesn't mean you're powerless, it means you need to treat both fronts, not just one. Now, here's what you can do to protect both your gut barrier and your liver simultaneously. These interventions address both fronts of fatty liver disease, the metabolic front and the gut liver front, because in practice they share many of the same solutions. This is the single intervention that addresses both pathways at once. Ultra-processed food delivers fructose and refined carbohydrates that drive hepatic fat accumulation through de novo lipogenesis. And it delivers emulsifiers and additives that damage the gut barrier and promote endotoxin translocation through the portal vein. Removing ultra-processed food from your diet simultaneously reduces the metabolic load on the liver and protects the barrier that keeps inflammatory toxins out. No single dietary change has a larger combined effect on liver health. Your beneficial gut bacteria need dietary fiber to produce the short-chain fatty acids, particularly butyrate, that maintain tight junction integrity and support the gut barrier. Vegetables, legumes, whole grains, nuts, seeds, and fruit in its whole form are all excellent fiber sources. Fermented foods like natural yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, and kimchi introduce beneficial bacterial species directly into the gut. Research published in Cell has shown that a combination of dietary, fiber, and fermented foods increases microbiome diversity and reduces markers of systemic inflammation more effectively than either intervention alone. If you're taking ibuprofen or naproxen regularly for chronic pain, Talk to your doctor about alternatives that don't compromise the gut barrier. Paracetamol, physical therapy, targeted exercise, and certain topical treatments may provide pain relief without the intestinal permeability damage that NSAIDs cause. If you need NSAIDs for an acute problem, short-term use is far less damaging than chronic daily use. The goal is to protect the gut lining from the ongoing prostaglandin suppression that opens the door to endotoxin translocation. Chronic stress damages the gut barrier through cortisol-mediated reduction of mucosal blood flow and tight junction disruption, and it damages the liver directly through cortisol-driven fat storage and insulin resistance. Stress management is therefore a dual pathway intervention. Regular aerobic exercise, consistent quality sleep, breathing practices, time in nature, and genuine social connection all reduce cortisol, support gut barrier integrity, and reduce the inflammatory load reaching the liver through the portal vein. When antibiotics are necessary, take them. They save lives and they are sometimes essential. But after a course of antibiotics, actively support your microbiome recovery by increasing your intake of fiber-rich whole foods and fermented foods for the following weeks and months. Discuss with your doctor whether a probiotic may be appropriate during or after antibiotic treatment. And avoid requesting antibiotics for conditions where they're not indicated, such as viral infections. Every unnecessary course of antibiotics disrupts the gut microbiome and temporarily increases the vulnerability of your gut barrier. And one essential note, if you have been diagnosed with fatty liver disease, NASH, or any liver condition, please work with your doctor on all treatment decisions. The gut-focused changes I've described are designed to complement medical care, not replace it. If you're on any prescribed medication, do not change or stop it based on this video. In the emergency department, I see the late stages of liver disease, variceal bleeding, ascites, hepatic encephalopathy, liver failure, and in the majority of those non-alcohol related cases, the gut was part of the story that nobody had investigated. The chronic inflammation that drove simple fatty liver into NASH and eventually into cirrhosis was being fed, at least in part, by a gut barrier that had been leaking endotoxins into the portal vein for years. I've also seen patients who caught it on the other side, patients who cleaned up their diet and also addressed their gut health, who eliminated ultra-processed food, increased fiber and fermented foods, managed their stress, and stopped taking NSAIDs daily. Their liver fat decreased on follow-up imaging, their inflammatory markers dropped, their liver enzyme patterns improved. The improvement came faster and went deeper than diet change alone could account for, because they were closing the second front. They were stopping the endotoxin leak that was driving inflammation from below. Here's what I want you to take from this video. Your liver does not exist in isolation. It sits at the end of a direct pipeline from your gut, and the health of that pipeline determines in large part whether your liver heals or deteriorates. The gut-liver axis is not a fringe concept. It is a central mechanism in the progression of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, validated by research from the world's leading hepatology institutions. If you're treating your liver without treating your gut, you're fighting the disease on one front while the other remains wide open. The dietary changes that reduce sugar and fructose are essential, but they're not the complete picture. The complete picture includes a gut barrier that's intact, a microbiome that's diverse and protective, and an inflammatory load that's low enough for the liver to actually heal. Your liver wants to heal. It has extraordinary regenerative capacity, but it can't heal if it's under constant inflammatory assault from endotoxins arriving through the portal vein every hour of every day. Seal the barrier, feed the bacteria, reduce the toxins, and give your liver the quiet it needs to repair itself. The hidden cause of fatty liver that doctors rarely mention is the gut-liver axis. A damaged gut barrier allows bacterial endotoxins to leak through the portal vein directly into the liver, where they activate Kupffer cells, trigger chronic inflammation, drive fat accumulation, and accelerate fibrosis. This pathway operates independently of diet, alcohol, and body weight. It is driven by ultra-processed food emulsifiers, gut dysbiosis, chronic stress, NSAIDs, and antibiotics. And it is addressed not by cutting calories or avoiding fat, but by protecting the gut barrier, feeding beneficial bacteria, and reducing the inflammatory load that reaches the liver from below. If you have fatty liver or are concerned about it, treat both fronts, not just what goes into your liver, what leaks into it. If this video showed you a cause of liver disease you hadn't heard before, please hit the subscribe button and the like button. Every subscribe and every share helps this channel reach more people whose gut is quietly damaging their liver without anyone looking in the right place. And if there's a health topic you'd like me to cover next, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next video.